Be the envy of the neighborhood. 860 KKAT, where the grass is always greener. Welcome to Gardening Utah. Here's composter and show hoster, Jana Francis.
Welcome to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis. Every week here on Gardening Utah, we give you gardening inspiration and advice from experts across the state. We talk about vegetables, flowers, trees, shrubs, and of course, your lawn. Thank you for listening. I hope this show is something that you'll look forward to checking in with every week. Whether you're a beginner or an expert, Gardening Utah aims to inspire you and keep you in the know of what tasks you should be accomplishing in your yard and meet amazing, informative experts along the way. This show airs on the radio on the weekends here in Utah at 10 a.m. on 860 AM KKAT, and episodes drop every weekend on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, so hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. On today's show, we are going to be giving you all of the new resources that are available for Utah homeowners to help you create a more efficient landscape. Now, whether you have a yard that's not even done yet, or whether you are just wanting to fix up certain parts of your yard, this is the show for you because we're really going to dig into all of the new resources that are available, and that might even mean rebates. Now, some of you may have heard of Flip Your Strip or Localscapes. I know we've talked about both of those a lot on my show in the past. However, that in the past was limited to a certain number of counties. So we're going to go through what additional areas are now applicable for the rebates for Flip Your Strip and for Localscapes. And Cynthia Bee from Localscapes is going to be giving us all the scoop on how to get you the resources you need to not only get the rebates, but to get inspired, follow the step-by-step plans to really turn your backyard into a yard that works for you instead of you working for your yard. So I love this concept. It's really genius, but it's not just that. We are going to talk about all the different things that are available to you and really talk about some of the hottest new trends in landscaping, specifically in Utah. And it's a fun one. So get your pen and paper ready because there are going to be a lot of links that we're going to mention, a lot of websites that you should visit to either sign up for the classes, sign up for the rebates. You don't necessarily need, if you're in a county, for example, that isn't applicable for the rebate, you don't necessarily need to be applicable for the rebate to be able to take advantage of the training and the classes and all of the resources online. So we're going to give you that full information. And if you're listening to the show on the radio, if you want to find the direct links to all of the resources that we bring up in this show, just go to Apple Podcast or Spotify and click on the episode notes for episode 68, and that will send you directly to all of the places that we reference later on in this show. And speaking of Cynthia Bee, if you would like to see her speak in person, next weekend, the Salt Lake Home and Garden Show is going to be going on at the Mountain America Center. And Cynthia is speaking both Friday and Saturday. And you can go to that show and have a listen to some of her talks, as well as we do have quite a bit of past guests on Gardening Utah that are also speaking. So I know that Cameron Alcott is teaching a class on, I think, the right plants for Utah. And I know that Malie Hokie is also teaching a class, and there's just a great speaker lineup. So be sure to have a look at that if you're going to go to the Salt Lake Home and Garden Show next weekend. Speaking of next weekend, it's my birthday, and one of the reasons I love my time of year for my birthday is that it's when everything starts waking up from a very cold winter's nap, and I'm so excited. I know you are too. If you're listening to the show, you're just as passionate about gardening as me, and I just love walking through the garden right now and seeing all the little herbs coming back and just new life emerging. It's just giving me so much joy to just be outside and, get things planted. I've got my peas planted. It's a little bit early to plant peas, but I'm just giving it a little college try, a little bit of a risk, but I'm just having so much fun getting my seeds started. And if you haven't listened to my episode on starting seeds indoors and you plan on starting seeds, you definitely need to go have a listen because I give you the main mistakes that people make when they start their seeds indoors, and nobody wants to lose seeds and all that hard work, right? So definitely give that show a listen if you haven't yet. So speaking of seeds and things that you can do this time of year in the garden, let's head over to the tip of the week.
860 KKAT. with your Gardening Utah tip of the week.
My tip of the week is just a handful of things that you can probably do in your yard right now, depending on where you live in Utah. Now, if you have thawed soil, you can now begin directly sowing cold hardy crop seeds like lettuce, peas, kale, calendula, poppies, and wildflowers, and they'll come up with the rest of your garden as the soil warms. Just make sure to keep the area a little bit moist for consistent germination. And if you've purchased plants like cannas, calla lilies, begonias, elephant ears, and dahlias, now is the time that you're going to want to get them in pots. Now you're going to want to leave them indoors, like in a garage or somewhere where it's not too cold, because it is obviously way too cold to get them outside, but you can get them started in pots and then get them outside as soon as the danger of frost is over. One other quick tip, it is still too early to prune those roses. Just be patient, wait a couple more weeks. I'll let you know when it's okay to do it.
And that's your Gardening Utah tip of the week, brought to you by The Advocates. If you're in an accident, you deserve an advocate. Call 801-355-5550 or visit utahadvocates.com. Never miss a tip for your garden and never miss an episode. The Gardening Utah Podcast with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT.
Well, let's jump right into today's show with Cynthia Bee from Localscapes. Cynthia, I love having you on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. It's always fun to chat. I love talking about landscapes and gardens.
So today we're going to jump into a very special topic that you've prepared for us. Why don't you tell us what we are going to be chatting about today?
You know, there has been so many new resources that have opened up in the last year to Utah homeowners to help make this shift that we're all going to have to make towards more efficient landscapes. And that doesn't mean zero scapes and rock and cactus. It still means attractive landscapes, but the days of 90% lawn are just gone. We just can't be that. We can't be that anymore. We have too many people. Our weather's become increasingly unstable, and it's very difficult to build new water storage. So we really are just going to have to learn to be smarter with what we have. So with that in mind, a lot of new tools have come online, not just with Conservation Garden Park and through Jordan Valley Water, but also through some of the other water districts. So more and more homeowners are actually able to get incentives and such to make these changes in their yard.
Last year, certain counties weren't, like I know like with the Flip Your Strip program, for example, there were some places that could and get that rebate and then some that couldn't, but that expanded a lot, didn't it?
Yeah. So initially the program was started by Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District, and we serve 2/3 of Salt Lake County, and that's it. So, and we only do culinary water. We don't have any secondary water. So it was originally, the programs were open to a very small percentage of people. But last August, the Central Utah Water Conservancy District voted to fund the programs because that's why they're limited. It's based on who's paying out these rebates. Yeah. And they voted to fund it for their area as well. And Central is the largest water district in the state, and they cover Utah County, the rest of Salt Lake County, Wasatch, Juab, San Pete, Uinta, and Duchesne.
Wow. So
all of those places, homeowners are now able to participate in programs.
I love it. That's excellent news.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So, you know, of course, water managers are watching really carefully. It's too early to say what it's going to look like. Drought monitoring committees are just getting started right now because, you know, we don't know till the end of the season. But I'm definitely, there's going to be some concerns statewide. We're coming into we came out of a pretty hard year last year. Not a lot has changed. So we'll see what that looks like.
I mean, yeah, I'm sitting here. We're recording this at the beginning of March. I can't think of a time at the beginning of March when it's been this warm outside.
65 degrees out there today was quite nice.
Yeah, it was lovely.
I'm like, I know we're going to pay for this. We're going to pay for this, but it's so great.
I know, it is so nice. But then at the same time, it's like, oh boy, 3 years ago today, it snowed. So, it's just such a dramatic.
And next week it could snow again. That's Utah.
Yep. That's Utah, especially in March.
Well, and one of the challenges, I think we're always going to be either in a drought cycle or we're going to be recovering from one. Yeah. Our water storage, our reservoirs, they're buffer. So it allows anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 years worth of water supply to be stored. But in years like last year, we drew down on that storage. And so we're going to possibly draw down on it again this year. We don't know. But that means once it starts to get more normalized again, or what used to be our normal, I hope we get back to that normal. We still have to conserve because we got to rebuild that supply for the next drought. And so the idea that we only have to conserve when a drought is on is kind of like another thing that we need to sunset, another change that we need to kind of recognize, because when we have water, it's not just what we get, it's what we can keep. And trying to keep that supply as stocked as possible is in every single Utahns' interest.
Absolutely. I see a lot of posts from people saying, well, my water use doesn't really impact anything. And so, it's ours for the taking. And that's just not the right way to look at it, is it?
No, that's very frustrating too. Or it's, it's agriculture. It's all, most of the water is used by agriculture, which is not untrue, except that, most of the reservoirs are for agriculture. Not all water is drinking water quality. Not every reservoir can be converted to drinking water. So, it's really what's important is the water that's on the system that you live on. What a farmer in Richfield does means nothing to you on the Wasatch Front in terms of what water supply is available to you. So it really comes down to the system that you get your water from and what their circumstance is. And I think we'll probably start to see some of that this year. You'll see, just different water systems will have different rules. Some will have restrictions, some may not need to. It just depends on their sources and how much supply they have, and what kind of runoff in spring we get. So there's just so many factors involved, but I think we will see probably this year, some places will probably have restrictions. I don't know where or how much, but I would anticipate that in places that they don't have as deep of storage, that you'll see more of that than places where they do.
Yeah. And so for those that may end up with water restrictions, do you feel like that's going to be, where do you start with water restriction? Is it typically like you can't water between these hours, or you can only water once a week?
It just depends. It's too variable to say, because it's just going to depend on, even individual water systems and what they need to do to balance their supplies. So I couldn't even begin to tell you what those would look like. Yeah.
So a homeowner with grass right now, as we're moving into the spring, the one thing that I've just a generalized piece of advice, as I've always said, is do not even think about watering until after Memorial Day. I know that things have changed, climate wise, since that became like a long standard piece of advice for Utah. But it's true that the longer you wait to water your lawn, the deeper those roots are going to go into the soil to search out for water, which is better for you in the long run. Is that still correct?
You're absolutely right. That is the way to create your healthy lawn. There is no reason to be adding water to your lawn in March or April. There's no reason to try to green it up as soon as possible. I always try to make it just a challenge for myself. How long can I go? Yes. And there are times where I might need to water once in May, because it's just too long, right? But don't begin regular watering. What most people do is they just flip the switch and turn the watering on, usually in April, sometimes watering every single day. And I think it's not that people mean to waste water. They just don't know. Like, we don't necessarily think about, when we think of water use, if you ask someone what they're doing to conserve water, they'll typically say, oh, I'm taking a shorter shower, or, I turn off the water when I brush my teeth, and those things. And those are great things to do. Those do save some water. But while you're saving a gallon here or a few gallons there, every time you run that sprinkler system, it's anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 gallons per time you operate it. So if you're turning that sprinkler system on every single day, it's 100,000 gallons. Really quickly you can get to 100,000 gallons. It's just crazy.
It really is crazy. And so if I could, that's the one thing that I really it's just, I've told you before, it's my pet peeve, and one of my reasons for doing this show is to really help educate people that don't know or haven't heard on just generalized, things that conserve water, but that are also healthier for your yard and landscape in the long term. Like you said, you don't just go out and turn on your sprinklers on a routine in April. It just doesn't make sense. You really want to eyeball it at first and let it go as long as possible. And then you just eyeball it. It's not going to need a watering every other day or even once a week, even after Memorial Day. And of course, it depends on the type of moisture we get, as you mentioned. But there is just no such thing anymore as like turning on your sprinklers on a routine. It makes no sense at all.
Right. And most people don't know. And so the sprinklers are either on or off. And when they water, they're watering like it's July. But even July, you don't need to water every day. And so, and it's not that they mean to, that a lot of times they just don't know how to rework their timers. One thing that we definitely recommend, and this is available to every single Utah homeowner, and that is to get a smart controller.
Yes.
And to be totally honest, a smart controller is not smarter than a homeowner paying attention. But it definitely picks up the slack for when you can't.
Yeah.
So those smart controllers, they're hooked up to Wi-Fi. You have an app on your phone. You can manage your system. You can see the last time it was watered. Maybe your partner turned on the water and you didn't know, and then you watered it as well. Whatever. There's but you can see the history, soil moisture estimates. It will automatically shut off your system and delay the watering if there's rain or if there's high winds. So that, that it's just not making sense to apply the water. So you don't have to be quite as on the ball if you have a smart controller. At the same time, it will still use more water than a homeowner paying attention. So, but taking advantage of that tool, and the rebate's like $75. So that covers generally at least half the cost of upgrading it. And it's very easy to switch it out. So there's really no good reason to not enjoy the benefits that is bringing you.
Absolutely.
I accidentally left a drip irrigation zone on in my yard once. We were getting ready to go on vacation, and I had just made a bunch of changes, and I thought, I'm going to water these plants in good. Then I went to Oregon for 9 days. Oh. And when I got home, it was a day before I realized it was on. So I literally had a drip zone. Luckily, it was just a drip zone. So what I lost in water was definitely more than it cost me to do a smart controller. But if I'd had a smart controller, I would have been alerted to that problem. I mean, I guess I wouldn't have had to create it in the first place, because I would have just turned it on with my smart controller, with my phone, but I would have at least been alerted, and I could have done something. I could have turned it off from I-15.
Right. Totally. Okay. So for our listeners, I will put in the episode notes links to where you can purchase these, but why don't you tell us where we can find those?
UtahWaterSavers.com is where you would do your rebate.
Okay.
You can purchase your smart controller. Any WaterSense approved smart controller qualifies.
Okay.
So as long as it has the WaterSense label, there's no specific brand you have to get as long as it's WaterSense certified. And so, and then you'll just submit your receipt, and they've got the whole process if you want to look at that on UtahWaterSavers.com, so you know what you need to do. Okay. But it's definitely worth doing.
Okay, I did not know this, so I'm really happy I'm going to put this in the next couple episode notes too, so that people can, find this even if they don't listen to this particular episode. So I love that.
Awesome. Well, we have, so really what we're trying to do is create a framework for people to learn how to make this shift, because we're all going to have to do it. Most people we teach, I'd say 80% of the people we're teaching through the Conservation Garden Park and Localscapes are people that are making small changes. They're doing a little bit, and that's okay. Like, a small change is better than no change. And that's the reality of budget for most of us, right? I'm in the same boat. Most of my coworkers, all the people teaching these classes, part of the reason we know how to teach people to do small projects is because that's how we have to change our yards too. So it's just, what most people have to do. And so, if you're working through that and you want to get some of these rebates, the park strip flip is, I think, the hottest landscaping trend in Utah. We saw a 4-fold increase last year. And now that it's opened up to a much broader range, I mean, it's going to be insane this year. We're going to try really, really hard to keep up with the demand. But people are having such great success with these flipped park strips. And then their neighbors see them. And their neighbors are like, well, you know what? Why do I have lawn? It's the first time they might have even thought about, why do I have lawn there? I don't need lawn in that park strip. That's a great place I can give it up and do some good. And you're looking at an average of 8,000 to 10,000 gallons of water you're saving just by doing the park strip.
Oh, my word. That's a lot. That's such a great
place to start.
Yep. And they look beautiful.
And what we find is it catches on. Someone has to be lone weirdo. You got to be the first person willing to do it in your neighborhood. Yeah. But if you do it and you do a good job, and we have a whole free online class people can take to learn how to do a good job, and they can access that at localscapes.teachable.com. Perfect. And so anytime they can take those classes. And, the park strips are just going to be, I can't wait to see all the new ones this year. It's so fun to roll up on one of those. And you watch, like our homeowners tell us, people slow down as they drive by their house and gawk because it just looks great. Do it right. So, not all flips are equal. We want to teach you how to do it and have a successful, easy to maintain outcome.
Yes. Because, a lot of the perennials that people are putting in, what you guys are teaching people is putting in water-wise plants. They all bloom at maybe different times of the year, but they have such interest and they bring native pollinators to the area, beautiful butterflies. And it really creates a sense of motion and an additional sense of color and charm, I think, to a home. Don't you think?
Well, and even separating you from the road a little bit. That flat lawn doesn't really give you that sense of separation. And so that's a nice way to do it. We definitely want to stick with lower plants because you need to be able to see pedestrians on sidewalks and such, So there are definitely some rules you need to follow to flip the park strip. But all of that is covered on the Flip Your Strip program through Utah Water Savers. And if you're in an area where rebates aren't available yet, you can still get all of the education and do all of that learning. And there's no cost to you to do any of that.
And it's definitely something that a homeowner without a ton of experience can tackle because you do walk people through step by step on how to do it, right?
Right. And it's honestly a really good first place to start because, it can be overwhelming to change the yard. People feel kind of intimidated about what it might take to do that. But park strips are usually pretty straightforward. And it's a chance to learn how to maintain a drip irrigation system and native plants or, these they can be adapted plants as well. They don't have to be native, but they need to be salt tolerant. They need to be able to really take those extra hot conditions that a park strip has. So Absolutely. It's just a great opportunity for people to try it out. In fact, at work, we call it the gateway drug. Once they've tried the park strip out, they're willing to move across, they're like, well, that worked out so well. I want to try that in my side yard or, where else can I remove some of the lawn, that isn't really serving me.
Absolutely. I love it. I love that. The gateway drug. That's so true. And I'm really excited about doing mine. In fact, I'll tell you about this after this quick break, but we'll be right back after this with Rethinking Our Landscapes right here on Gardening Utah. Stay with us.
860 KKAT with Jenna Francis and Gardening Utah, where it's always mulch time. She really does have the nicest yard on the block. It's Gardening Utah with Jenna Francis on 860 KKAT.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jenna Francis, and with me today is Cynthia Bee from Jordan Valley Water Conservancy and Localscapes. I'm so happy you're here again. Thanks so much for joining us today.
It's so fun to be on. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've already discussed several really amazing resources that Utah homeowners have, whether they're in our area or not, that they can log into to get inspiration and ideas on either rethinking their landscape and, flipping their strip and conserving water and planting things that are going to have a lot more success in our areas. So talk us through some additional things that you guys offer that homeowners can be taking advantage of.
Okay. Yeah, we actually have a few different offerings. So I'll just talk about it through the different properties. So if you go to localscapes.com, you can see classes that are available statewide that you can take. A lot of them are online webinars. So even if it's not perfectly in your area, that's fine. Those of our St. George, Washington County folks, the Washington County Water Conservancy District also teaches Localscapes, but they have a version that's local to St. George. So it's a little bit different on materials and plants because your local is different than my local. And that's the whole beauty of the Localscapes thing. It's supposed to bring it down to what is important for where you are and where you live that makes the most sense. So the 5 steps are the same anywhere, but the requirements and best practices will vary a little bit based on your location because it's all about the best practices for you. And so we've worked really hard to get a statewide network of experts. We work with Utah State Extension and then the different conservancy districts and others as well to really try to bring these resources as close to home as we can. And this year there'll be classes in St. George, in Cedar City, Orem, Layton. Of course, here we just had some in Tooele. So we're really trying hard to get that information as close as we can to you. But because of the pandemic, it's great. You can access these things online anytime that works for your schedule anywhere in the state. So we're just trying to make as many of those opportunities available as possible. There's also a resources section, and you can download park strip plans. So if you're like, yeah, I want to flip my strip, but I don't know how to make it look good. You can go in there and look at our free plans and decide which one you like and go ahead and, and use that plan as the foundation for your own flip. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel that way if you don't want to. If you want to see results, does this really look good? Can regular people do this? I'm just a regular homeowner. Can I actually achieve a great outcome with this? We actually have a really great online gallery. We just started it, so we have so many more photos to add to it. But if you go to jvwcd.photoshelter.com,
okay, I'll put
you can
this link
see
in the episode
galleries. Yep. You can see some galleries that will show flipped park strips and folks that have achieved the Localscapes Rewards program. Localscapes Rewards, actually, we haven't even talked about that. That's for people that are doing a full front yard, a full backyard, or a whole landscape. You can be installing a yard from scratch, so, the very beginning, and you haven't made any mistakes yet, or you can be a homeowner that's fixing all the mistakes that got made before. Either way, you qualify to participate if you're in the participating areas for that Localscapes Rewards program. And if you're thinking about doing that and thinking about making a fairly significant change in your yard, definitely go and apply for the program before you start your project so that you can be approved and eligible. The same is true with the park strip. If you're going to participate in the park strip program, don't kill the lawn in the park strip until you get approved for the program. Just to make sure, because one of the requirements in the park strip program, you actually are required to have living lawn because it's a turf buyback. So if there's nothing to purchase, we can't do the program. So it's a little bit different. Whereas with Localscapes Rewards, you can start with bare ground or wherever you're at and move forward from there. So.
Okay, with Localscapes Rewards then, and if you haven't started your landscape and you go to apply, what is the, talk me through, do you have to use certain vendors or just follow the plan and then apply after? Walk me through how that works.
Yeah, so what you'll need to do is you'll need to create a plan. And now it doesn't have to be fancy. As a designer, when I design plans for people, they have to be fancy because we're going to get people to spend a whole bunch of money based on what I see in my head that they don't. When you're doing your own yard, you already know how you see it in your mind. You just need a good enough drawing that's done to scale that can help you achieve it. And we have all of the classes and programs set up to help you go from that start to finish. You do need to take the Localscapes University course as a minimum. That's a 2-hour class, and that helps you know what to do and how to accomplish those tasks in a way that leave you with that that lower maintenance over time. What we're really teaching is how to balance your landscape. It's not just about having less lawn, because if you just pull out lawn and then you put in all plants, you'll use less water, but your maintenance is not less.
Right.
And so what we want people to do is balance the spaces that need work and water against spaces that don't. So there's 5 steps in the Localscape, and that's the first one is the central open shape, which is usually lawn for most people. It doesn't have to be. You can go fully lawnless, but if you go lawnless, that needs to be hardscape or gravel or something that's just an open space in the landscape that isn't going to need work and water. And then you've got your gathering areas, activity zones, and paths. All of those, with the exception of vegetable gardens, don't need work and water once you install them.
Right.
So you've got all these great ways to use the landscape that don't make you a slave to the landscape. And then the leftover spaces will become the planting beds. And that's kind of the method that we teach. And there's, different requirements based on where you live and what makes sense in your community. But it's just a great way forward.
And it's genius. And it's absolute genius. And it's such a change from what you see some homeowners do, which is, the whole subdivision's done. And so now we're going to put in our trenches and we're going to put in our sprinklers first and our vinyl fence. And then it's like this square of grass. And then it's like, oh, wait, we want some garden beds. We'll just take out the left corner. And that it's just completely opposite from that. It's like reversing it. You put in the irrigation last, right?
Right. The main thing is that you're not assuming a ground plane of grass that you then plop things on top of.
Yeah.
Instead, we're saying, no, the lawn is one of the things you design, because we're not Kentucky where grass just naturally will grow, right? We're not starting with a ground plane of green. We're starting with dirt, know, and so, or native grasses or whatever we're starting with, but it's not green, lush lawn. And so the idea is that you design it like any other part of the landscape, just like you design the shape of a seating area or whatever else. The lawn's the same kind of deal. And so when we start to think about it that way, lawn is precious in this climate and we need to start treating it like it is. Yeah. And so when you create that central open shape, you have less lawn overall, but the way we teach you to make it, the lawn is completely functional. And a
Yes.
lot of the lawn that we have now, all of us, a lot of the lawn we have is just, it's there because we didn't know what else to do there.
Yeah.
And so we're teaching you what else to do.
Yes, exactly. And it's a lot more fun. You've got your, your little entertaining areas and your seating areas and activities. And it's so fun. It's such a genius way to really plot out your landscape.
And we have lots of tools to help homeowners learn how to do it. People are overwhelmed by irrigation. We have a class on that, that's even one that's upcoming. Or if you're not sure how to design it, or if you should design it, sometimes taking the design workshop is how you learn that, nope, it's going to be worth it to me to hire someone that knows what they're doing. I really can't do this. That's okay. You learn something, right? And you'll know how to talk to the designers a little bit better and how to ask for what you want. When it comes to actually doing your project, if you're hiring professionals, you are welcome to hire anyone. Just know that they got to follow the best practices and stuff if you want to get your rebate. But also we do have qualified Localscapes partners that already know how to do it, or that of their own volition chose to be part of Localscapes because they see it as the way forward. And so if you check the Localscapes website and scroll to the bottom of the main page, you'll find a long list of local contractors, designers, nurseries, landscape suppliers, engineers, architects, like everyone that's looked at this and said, you know what, I want to be part of it. And you can find the services that you need with someone that's already experienced in doing a localscape.
Fantastic. And I love the Washington County element too, because, in doing this show, I feel like sometimes I focus so much on Northern Utah because that's where I live. And, but it is such a totally different place down in Southern Utah for sure.
It is.
It's so much.
Oh yeah. The Red Hills Desert Garden. I mean, amazing. If residents are not taking advantage of that, it's just incredible. And showing all the best plants for Washington County. So, you can grow stuff the rest of us can't. We all have plant envy up here, but, we all want to push that zone, right? I want to be one zone warmer than I am. But to be a gardener is to want the plants you cannot have, right? So anyway, so yes, St. George makes us all a little bit, wishing that we could grow some of the things that they can. Totally. But I'm sure the opposite is also true, right? It's just that's part of gardening, is to want what's not in your climate. So what we're trying to teach people is how to get the look of that thing you like, but with stuff that works in your climate.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I love that. Okay, so we've got Localscapes, we've got Flip Your Strip. What other resources do you want to tell us about today?
Well, okay, so the Conservation Garden Park, for people that are in Salt Lake County or near enough to come to Salt Lake County, there's also the Weber Basin Learning Garden up in Layton. Ooh. And then, of course, we just mentioned the Red Hills Desert Garden in St. George. And then Red Butte also has a really amazing conservation garden. But all of those spaces can show you what it looks like. And, I work most closely, of course, with the Conservation Garden Park. And the number one question that we would get from people coming to the garden, and maybe people have really changed a lot in the last few years, but the number one question I used to get was, this is beautiful. Could you show me where the water-wise plants are? Because what people perceive as water-wise, is cactus, lava rock, or, whatever that looks like to them. And so they're very surprised to see how lush the garden is. And to start to realize, we look at it and go, well, it's all of it, Wow. And so that's the idea, that there's over 1,200 beautiful plants. We've got dry shade plantings, pollinator gardens, park strip examples. You can experience what it would feel like if you had a localscape in your yard. We have the Localscapes exhibit there that's a 1/4 acre. So it really is to the right scale. If you want to kind of wonder, well, if I did this, what would my yard end up like, or how could it end up? And so that's kind of a demonstration there. And all the plants, they've worked really, really hard to get everything labeled. So one of the great ways, okay, here's an insider tip on how to use the Conservation Garden Park, or either of the other gardens as well, because everyone labels their plants. What I tell homeowners is, if there's a time in the year where your yard's seeing a little lackluster, there's not enough in bloom, doesn't look interesting enough, right? That's exactly when you would come to one of these gardens. Because if it's blooming for us at that time, it would most likely be blooming for you as well. So you don't have to try to sit there and balance all the bloom times and everything else. All you got to do is come over to the garden and see what's working for us already. Because in the nursery, things aren't on their natural bloom cycle, right? They're growing, they're not in the ground yet. They're blooming at different times that might not be their normal times. But in the garden, they're planted and labeled so that you can really get a feel for what you like.
I love that idea. And for me, that is like July. For me in my yard, it's July,
Right.
so I'll be heading there in July for sure. That's
And if you want to get a little idea in advance, just online, if you go to Conservation Garden Park's Facebook page and look in the albums, we actually have Blooms of the Week photos. So
Oh,
you can look
wow.
at dates, different dates of the year, and all the plants are labeled as to what they are. So you can get a feel even for how long things will bloom.
Yeah.
Some things bloom longer than others. So those photos will also help you get an idea of, well, how long can I expect this plant to bloom? On the Conservation Garden Park's Facebook page, or no, sorry, not Facebook, on their website, we have an online plants database, and it's all the plants we've actually grown in the garden that work. The ones that don't work don't make the database, right? So if you're trying to pick plants for your yard, whether you can get to the garden or not, you can actually access that database, and it's based on plant information from Salt Lake County. So, there's over 1,200 plants in the database, and you can use that to kind of help narrow down your choices and what you're interested in. But even beyond picking plants, there's also maintenance information that's included. So once you have it, you're able to go back and know how to take care of it over time. And so, we wanted to make it a reason that you would come back again and again.
Yeah.
And the other great thing is for those of our residents that are in the higher salt areas, so anyone receiving secondary water from Utah Lake, one of the things that you can do is search by salt tolerance, or just select, that brings back results that are salt tolerant. And so those are the plants that can handle the actual conditions you really have. And they've also tied that plant database into Localscapes and the things that are taught in Localscapes. So the two things, kind of work with each other very well.
Interesting. That's a great tip. I love that.
Yeah, lots of fun stuff. So between, you kind of learn what to do with the Localscapes principles. You see it in action at the Conservation Garden Park or the Weber Basin Learning Garden, or Washington's Red Hills Desert Garden. You can actually see what that is like and experience it. And then in most parts of the state, you can get rebates for actually implementing what you've learned in your own landscape. And that's through UtahWaterSavers.com.
Okay.
And, the programs are constantly expanding. We hope to keep them expanding more and more. It's just the challenge of, someone has to fund those programs.
Yeah.
And beyond funding, they've got to actually have people in place to help, implement and manage. And so it's no small thing to be able to create something like that and offer that. It's a big deal. Take advantage of that opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like you said, even if you're not going to be able to get the rebate, take advantage of the free resource to at least, help you get there and do the same work for sure.
Yeah. And our Localscapes homeowners have been so happy. That's what's fun. We're far enough down the pike now that we have people that have had Localscapes for multiple years and have managed them. And they almost always come back to us and say, oh, I'm just so happy with it. And it looks so good. And my neighbors all want to know how I did it. It took a little bit longer for them to put their yard in than some. But, like one of the homeowners I talked to last summer, she's like, all my neighbors that in this new home, new construction neighborhood, and they just quickly threw down lawn because they just needed to get the yard in fast. Because we took a little bit more time and put our yard in right. And now my neighbors have come to me and they're all just regretting not taking that extra time to get the yard that was going to function for their needs long term, not just at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. And wouldn't you agree that it greatly increases the value of your home?
Oh, absolutely. Almost always, as the plants fill in. Now, people freak out a little bit because the brand new ones, it takes a little bit for the plants to fill in. But just because of the way that the spaces are used in a Localscape and the way we've organized that and how you apply that to the land, they're almost always the best looking landscapes in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So we really felt like if we could come up with a solution that wasn't just about saving water, it needed to solve real problems for homeowners. And homeowners told us what they needed. They wanted landscapes. They needed something that was easier to understand. The number one reason people didn't change their yards, even when they wanted to, wasn't money. That was number two, and a close number two. But number one was just simply being overwhelmed and not knowing what to do. Wow. And so we wanted to make a very clear and actionable path for people to work through that from wherever you're starting. There's an inroad and there's resources for you to help you get to a place that gives you a landscape that's going to work well in Utah, that's going to serve your family's needs, that's attractive and interesting and functional and, easy to irrigate and uses at least half as much water or better. So our lowest performers are using 50% less water, but we're seeing people that are able to achieve 70% water savings over what their previous landscape did. And they're still having some lawn. You don't have to give up everything you care about. We just got to use it smarter.
Yes, absolutely. And they're so much prettier and more interesting to look at. And it's not the misconception with some is it's xeriscape. It's red lava rock with the white lava rock. And then, some, the yuccas and stuff. And it's not that at all. They look just as lush and beautiful as your neighbor. It's
true. And one of the other challenges is people will say, well, I can't have can't have planting beds or I'll have weeds. But one of the things that people don't know is that the reason you get so many weeds in your planting beds is usually because of the way you're watering them.
It's so true.
So if you're watering the planting bed along with the lawn on the same zones and at the same timing and the same frequency, you're putting as much as 6 times more water on the planting bed than it needs, and you're covering 100% of that soil surface with water. Of course, you're going to get weeds. You're cultivating them.
Yes.
Right. So if you want to cut that down, then we teach that through the Localscapes method. We teach you how to install planting beds using drip irrigation and mulch in a way that's going to reduce the maintenance substantially if you do just these certain things. So it's not just, have this or have that. We show you how to do it in a way that's going to produce something that's manageable over time.
Absolutely. And those are the 2 main things that prevent weeds. Is drip irrigation dramatically decreases the amount of weed seeds that germinate in the first place, and mulch. It fixes so many things. Mulch is just, I think, magic in general between water conservation and
happy plants, reduces the stress from the heat on the plants, and but you've got to do more than just make the soil look brown, right? A lot of times we just would put a 1/2-inch skiff on there because we're trying to make it stretch. But you need 3 or 4 inches of mulch. And then if you want to top it off with a 1/2 inch every so often, that's fine.
Yeah.
But, whether you're using rock mulch or organic mulch, that's up to you. But you definitely need to have enough of it that it's achieving the shading of that soil, so that the sunlight doesn't penetrate and the weeds grow. We don't typically recommend weed barrier fabric in planting beds.
No.
Just because it doesn't really serve a purpose over time. It doesn't. But heavy mulch will do the same kind of weed control without all the negatives that come with the fabric.
Absolutely. And it really improves the soil over time, where landscaping fabric really just kind of kills everything underneath and is not ideal.
If you've ever had to remove landscape fabric from a yard, there is absolutely no weed worse than removing old yucky landscape fabric. So
could not agree more.
You start out with good intentions in using it, but there are some applications for it under pathways and things like that, where you're not going to also try to grow plants.
Yep.
If you're going to also try to grow plants, we've got a whole thing in Localscapes. We'll teach you how to do that and minimize the impact of weeds and that type of thing.
Yes. And in fact, in 2 episodes ago, listeners, Mike Lawrence from the Conservation Water Park talked through landscape fabric and why it is a no-no. So if you want more of a deep dive on that, you can listen to that episode. Okay, Cynthia, we're almost out of time here, but I wanted to tell our listeners, you're going to be speaking at the Home and Garden Show, correct?
I am. And we have a bunch of great speakers who have been on Gardening Utah. We also have Nikki Wyman from Sandy City that's going to talk about Flip Your Strip. So if you're looking for that Flip Your Strip class, you can actually get it at the Home and Garden Show.
Oh, that's awesome. And you have Ty, right? Ty Pennington?
Ty Pennington is the celebrity guest this time, yeah. So he's a lot of fun.
I can't wait. Well, I'll be there. And thanks so much for being here on Gardening Utah, Cynthia. You're a gem for the state of Utah, so we appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
When you're ready to grow big or go home, make your neighbors green with envy. Get the Gardening in Utah podcast, Gardening Utah, available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden.